all again today, and it's my pleasure to welcome Acting TSA Administrator David Pakowski for a discussion today on return to travel and technological advancements in enhancing safety in the passenger experience. So, Administrator Pakowski, thank you so much for joining us, and we're glad to have you.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here, and it's great to see such a terrific audience
right
in front of us.
This is something that we've done for many years, and we're thrilled to keep it on. So, why don't we start right now with things that are most important in Washington, and that's budgets. Mm-hmm. You've requested nearly $10 billion in the upcoming fiscal year. Part of that is dedicated towards expansion of the workforce. You currently lead a team of over 60,000 employees. So, for you, what does that budget request mean? How will you use that to grow, retain, and expand your workforce?
Sure. Well, that budget request is critically important for us, and for the first time since TSA's founding, so we're almost 21 years old now, this budget will put all of our employees on an equal footing for pay with their counterparts in the rest of the federal government. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that we're under a different pay system. And if you took the pay that one of the officers you see in the screening checkpoint, for example, one of those uniform officers, received, and you took that position and classified it into any other federal agency, that person's pay would go up by about 30%. So it's a very, very significant difference. And these are national security positions, significant responsibility, and we want to make sure that we provide equitable compensation. So our proposal in the budget is for pay equity when it's annualized. So it'll start off hopefully in fiscal 23 for part year funding, and then it'll go to full year funding in fiscal 24. Just to give you a sense of scale, this request will be about $1.5 billion in fiscal 24. But so far, we've had great support from the House and from the Senate. They have different proposals for when it starts, but the most important thing is to start it, to get it put in place. And to your point earlier, Chris, I mean, this will make it much easier for us to recruit and much easier for us to retain the talent that we have. And the other thing I would add is it applies to every single position across the agency. You know, it's term pay equity because it's equitable across the entire agency and then within the agency to other federal agencies.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. And
Thanks.
it's everybody is fighting for workers, so we understand that, and the ability to pay people or provide a benefits package that's attractive is really key. Another thing that is on everybody's mind is cybersecurity. And last June, in the wake of the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, TSA promulgated a security directive that was with relation to the pipeline industry. Since then, your administration has also promulgated a similar directive regarding rail, and we understand that you are considering also a similar directive on aviation. So part one, and I'll have some follow-up questions, but can you tell us about that aviation security directive? What are you intending to accomplish? How are you working with the private sector on that, and what can we expect?
Sure. Well, what we're trying to accomplish is, across the entire transportation sector, is to improve our cybersecurity resilience. Because we have a significant threat that we're facing both from two dimensions, and we want to make sure that we build resiliency, which is going to take some time. And as you mentioned, we started out in the pipeline sector last year, and then have moved to the rail sector, and then soon to the aviation sector. But one of the things I think it's important to highlight is all the work that's gone into this on the part of the owners and operators of those systems. There were very significant requirements, particularly in pipelines initially, and will be in rail and certainly in aviation, both airports and airlines. Requires investment, requires some reprioritization, certainly on the part of the owners and operators. But one of the biggest things that we learned in this process, and we knew it, but we really employed it fully, is to ensure that we have a lot of give and take in the appropriate fora to make sure that we understand the impacts of what we're doing. So there was a series of roundtables that we conducted with our private sector partners that were incredibly beneficial to us. And really, I'd thank them for all they did to help us put a cybersecurity regime in place that will get us to that increased level of cybersecurity resilience. And the other part is, we've made significant progress within the federal government to ensure that federal agencies are all on the same page with each other. I'll give you an example. We require cybersecurity reporting because there was no cybersecurity reporting requirement generally in the transportation sector before we issued our directives. And so when a company said to us, hey, I experienced this cyber attack, how common is that within my industry subsector? We didn't know that information, so we required reporting. But rather than having that reporting come to TSA, we established that all the reporting would go to CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and then it was CISA's responsibility to ensure that the rest of us received it in near real time. That's worked out incredibly well. So an owner-operator has just one reporting source, and then that reporting source within the federal government is responsible for its distribution. So it keeps us all on the same page.
Yeah, and that's very helpful. We at the Chamber were very active, as many of you in the room know, on the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, together with other associations and partners. One of our key requests and discussion points has been harmonization and also regulatory coherence, where individuals in whatever industry to eliminate to eliminate multiple and duplicative reporting obligations. So I'm glad to hear that from your perspective, this is it's a step in the right direction. I think also you mentioned the public collaboration on the pipeline directive. I think there was a learning period, a learning curve on that. It came up fast. And I think from our discussions with others that it ultimately ended up in a much better place than it was at the beginning. So are there any lessons that you learned from that process that you will apply to the rollout of the aviation directive?
Yeah, we certainly learned a lot of lessons. I think the key lesson is to provide clear description of the outcome that you want to achieve. And we call that performance-based planning or performance-based rulemaking. And so what we're doing going forward is, we're establishing outcomes and then giving the owners and operators of the systems the opportunity to come back to us within a certain period of time after we issue the directive. So, generally between 90 and 120 days, and say, hey, given that outcome that we've established, and these outcomes are not new, these are outcomes that we've worked together on, that I, as the owner-operator of the system, this is how I intend to achieve that outcome. So they submit that implementation plan to us. We review it, and we review it with our interagency partners. So, for example, on any aviation issue, we'll review it with the FAA. On any pipeline issue, we will review it with PHMSA, rail with the Federal Railroads Administration. So we review them, make adjustments as we need to, bring them back to the owners and operators, and then the owners and operators have a responsibility 60 days after that to come back to us and say, hey, this is how we're going to audit our achievement of those outcomes. So we have some objective way of determining our achievement of increased resilience through the accomplishment of the outcomes we set out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. No, that's helpful. I want to shift gears a little bit and move to another important aspect where TSA has made some strides in access to trusted traveler programs. You're screening more than 2 million passengers a day. I mean, Labor Day was a tremendous Labor Day weekend, tremendous throughput. I know all of us that are traveling again are trying to find parking spots at the airports. There's a concept we were talking about earlier about one-stop security, which sounds like a very interesting concept. Can you tell us a little bit about this initiative and how this can enhance both security but also the passenger experience?
Sure, and just to go back to the travel volumes, I mean, we saw over the course of the entire summer, pretty much every day was 2 million plus passengers going through our screening checkpoints. That does not mean that there's only 2 million people in the system. That means that people that are transferring through don't count in that number. But 2 million, and then Labor Day, one of the things that we always measure is how close are we to full recovery from pre-pandemic levels. And Labor Day, across pretty much the entire weekend, was some days a little bit above, some days a little bit below, but pretty much right on 2019 volume levels. With one-stop security, a really important concept that does three key things that I think are important for us. And it's important for us not just in the one-stop concept, but really important for us in the investments and the training that we make going forward. One is that everything we do should improve security effectiveness. The second is we should always endeavor to improve security efficiency. And the third is we should endeavor to make sure that we improve or increase the passenger experience going through our screening process. So what one-stop security does is, to give you an example, I think it's the best way to explain it. If I was departing from a last point of departure airport, let's say it's London Heathrow, and I had a flight to JFK and then a follow-on flight to DCA right here in Washington. If I'm screened at London Heathrow, and there's an agreement between London Heathrow Airport and TSA and the UK government and TSA, so that we assure each other that we have commensurate security outcomes. That when I arrived as a passenger at JFK, I wouldn't need to be rescreened at JFK. I could go into, stay within the sterile area and go right into that connecting flight down to DCA. The benefit of one-stop security is it improves security significantly. It means that we will be more harmonized internationally to achieve the security outcomes that we need to achieve here. That we will be more harmonized in our technology and the software that runs within that technology. And so as you look at flights that might be coming from Europe or in the future from Asia, they would be more secure en route to the United States. And then because they're meeting U.S. security requirements, there really is no need to do that rescreening. So that is an efficiency piece for us. I mean, when we look at passenger volume growth, which will probably return to 4% year-over-year growth once we get to a full recovery, we can't continue to add 4% staff to our screening checkpoints. I mean, the screening checkpoints are physically constrained, and we need to find ways to be more efficient and direct the resources that we have to the areas where we see the greatest security risk, which would not be in a one-stop security arrangement. So I'm really excited about this. We need the authority from the Congress to be able to do one-stop in the United States, because right now U.S. law requires that any person traveling in the domestic U.S. system needs to be screened by a federal officer. And so what we're asking the Congress is to give us the authority to prototype one-stop in a defined number of locations, so we can move forward and really fully test this concept. But we've done a ton of work already, and I'm very confident that it's going to be incredibly successful going forward. So,
and just in terms of numbers, are you looking to roll it out with, X number of partners in, year one? Is that sort of like an evolving?
Well, I think what we'll do in terms of starting it is some countries don't require their officers to screen in their own countries. And so we could have one stop really outbound from the United States start first. And we've done a lot of work on that already. And then once our authorization comes in place, to figure out which are the prototype locations, to make sure that we fully brief up to our oversight committees in the Congress, the process we're going to use and how we're going to ascertain the security commensurability between the two systems. So I would expect that in the not too distant future, we will see some one-stop arrangements, if only outbound from the U.S. at first.
Got it. Thank you. Well, we're coming down on time, but I did want to also touch on drones and UAS. This is, that we've talked about it earlier in the day. There's going to be, this is a growing area in aviation. So, how's TSA thinking about UAS, and what are you working to monitor them to ensure they're safe, or that they're not posing undue risk to our airspace?
No, thanks, Chris. We've been thinking about UAS for a good number of years, long before I even came into the agency as the administrator 5 years ago. And we think about it in concert with the FAA as our partner federal agency and the FBI. And so the three principal agencies looking at UAS with respect to airport operations have been TSA, FAA, and the FBI. What we have done already for the core 30 airports, so for the 30 busiest airports in the country, we have already done vulnerability assessments on those airports, and we have plans for how we would detect, track, and identify, and then ultimately counter UAS in the airspace around those airports. The other thing that we put in place within TSA is we have 2 test beds now, one in Miami and one in Los Angeles, where we test, detect, track, and identify technology, because we want to be able to see how does it work, and does it interfere with any other transmissions that might be out there? Does it meet FAA requirements? Does it meet what the manufacturer is stating the equipment can do? So the first step in this is to really be able to detect, track, and identify before you can get into a counter situation. But I would just add very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, is that our authorization to do counter-UAS work expires on the 6th of October. And so we are asking, and we've gotten a lot of support to date on this, is to either extend that authorization for a period of time or to give us a more complete authorization going forward.
Understood. Well, look, we just scratched the surface on so many topics, and I know we've had a few calls before, and there's a lot more to talk about. So I'm going to make a public invitation for you to come back and join us at a future event. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully by this afternoon we can drop the acting from your title.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very
all.
much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.